I was still enjoying the panelists, their very interesting ideas, controversial subject, but time is not on our side. When we received the invitation from the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, I said to my office, I want to be here the whole day. But it was not possible because I had to chair the JCPS cluster because of the challenges that many of you are aware of in the country with justice, crime prevention, and so on. But let me thank you, Program Director, former President of South Africa and patron of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, His Excellency Thabo Mbeki, former Prime Minister of Australia, His Excellency Tony Abbott, former Prime Minister of Mali, His Excellency Moussa Mara, Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Togo Didiza. I didn't see her when I was coming in, maybe she's left. Former Minister of Commerce and Industry of India, Honorable Anand Sharma, Chairman, Observer Research Foundation of India, Mr. Sanjay Joshi, President, Observer Research Foundation, India, Mr. Samir Saran, Chief Executive of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, Mr. Max Botwana, distinguished guests, and everybody here present this afternoon. I'm really delighted to have been invited to participate in this second Cape Town conversation. The conversation takes place at the time of tectonic shifts in global politics. The world is facing a polycrisis characterized, amongst others, by high levels of poverty, inequality, economic stagnation, climate change, wars, amongst others. Over the past 3 days, we are aware that delegates here have engaged in identifying responses to the emerging challenges, including assessing progress on the outcome of the first Cape Town conversation. We regard this gathering as a critical and important platform in which you have taken it upon yourselves to reimagine the world by having honest reflections about where we are globally, and most importantly, how we want to chart the path ahead. Equally, in our country, over the past 30 years, since the dawn of democracy, we have been hard at work building a better life for all and contributing to a better Africa and a better world. We have taken it upon ourselves that our development as a country is intricately linked to the development and growth of our continent and indeed the world. In this context, we have been working on the continent for peace, stability, and security to silence the guns. Equally, we take a non-aligned stance in conflict and prioritize social justice, peace, and development across the world. Similarly, we have always been critical of the reforms of the United Nations and all its organs because we want equal opportunities for the rest of the continent. We have also demonstrated our appreciation and commitment for peace by taking Israel to the ICJ because of the crimes committed against the people of Palestine, particularly in Gaza. As President Mandela said, we know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. It is for this reason that we stand in solidarity with others. We stand in solidarity with the people of Cuba, Western Sahara, Sudan, South Sudan, and many parts of the world where there is conflict, where there is wars and insecurity. This we do because of solidarity and our commitment to unity. Compatriots and fellow delegates, we must resolve conflicts in Africa. In this regard, I would like to thank President Mbeki for his continued efforts for peace and security of the African continent. Equally, we must find lasting peace across the world, since when there are wars and conflicts, access to key resources becomes a big challenge, affecting economies, but more importantly, development. As countries of the Global South, we must therefore firmly ground our multilateral cooperation in the synergy between peace and development. Compatriots and fellow delegates, South Africa will assume the G20 presidency on the 1st of December this year, in a few days' time. The overarching theme that we chose for ourselves as South Africa, as we will be taking the presidency, is solidarity, equality, and sustainable development. South Africa intends to place Africa's development at the top of the agenda of the G20. We shall use this opportunity presented by the G20 to advance the priorities of the AU's Agenda 2063, which is the Africa we want. And we will do this in close collaboration with all others in the African Union. Through our G20, or throughout our G20 tenure, we will guarantee that the G20 remains attuned to the requirements of the developing economies in Africa and the broader Global South. South Africa firmly believes that the G20, with the United Nations at its center, is vital in accelerating the implementation of sustainable development goals. The global stagnation in advancing sustainable development is concerning and highlights the need for international cooperation in addressing these challenges, including those related to illicit financial flows, as an example. This would ensure that low and middle income countries have equitable access to sustainable development. Compatriots and fellow delegates, you will agree with me that there needs to be an expansion in the accessibility of affordable, reliable, and sustainable finance for low and middle income countries. Our countries also still need to make strides in areas such as energy, capacity building, access to affordable technology, particularly in the public domain, mutually beneficial technology cooperation, financing mitigation actions, particularly in the energy sector. Following some of your discussions, I'm pleased that there is some consensus that we should strengthen global collaboration through multilateralism to achieve our goals. South Africa believes that multilateral development banks and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, needs to be reformed to meet the needs of growing economies for sustainable development and climate resilience. This is some of the things I had the panelists also advocating. Presently, multilateral support is out of reach for most of the world's population, particularly due to risk-averse lending policies that impose heavy costs and conditions. South Africa is acting as a bridge between the global South and the international community, advocating for inclusive policies that represent the interests of low and middle income countries. As a member of international organizations like the United Nations, the African Union, BRICS, South Africa actively participates in domestic efforts to address these issues that are affecting developing countries. South Africa advocates for policies encouraging economic development, poverty eradication, social fairness, and sustainability in developing countries. This includes fair trade and fair trade agreements, debt relief, access to critical services such as healthcare and education, and also combating climate change. Through advocating for these interests on a global scale, South Africa ensures that the voices of these countries in the global South are heard and their demands are met in these international talks. This role as a mediator and advocate for the global South assists in building a more equal and inclusive international community. Compatriots and fellow delegates, South Africa also places importance on the issue of critical minerals and will seek to highlight this during its G20 presidency. The country aims to address issues of beneficiation, domestic resource mobilization, critical mineral strategy, interdependent supply chains, and natural capital. These minerals are crucial for a just transition and a green economy, and deliberations on the type of investment required to address these issues remains relevant today. During the Foundation's Africa Day lecture, Professor Adulei Bathili asked this question, whether Africa should remain the provider of raw materials whilst our population is dying of hunger. This question struck me and remain a point I continue to ponder on. And I want to say that indeed we must not continue to be raw material suppliers and allow our fertile lands to be auctioned off by international investors who come to exploit our raw minerals and export them to other countries. At the same time, our people remain jobless and continue to languish in poverty. Compatriots and fellow delegates, over the past 3 days, some discussions, some talks, have centered on the transformation of global governance, creating new growth pathways, and developing actionable solutions. In this regard, we are dedicating ourselves to offering a distinct opportunity to elevate the requirements, aspirations, and ambitions of countries in the global South. South Africa intends to build on the success of the Indonesian, Indian, and Brazilian G20 presidents and use its presidency to advance global reform agendas, particularly, as I said, in transforming global financial architecture and reforming those institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, and some of these multilateral development banks. We are also considering monitoring the G20's past commitments and the possibility of a G20 review. As we all know that with South Africa taking over the presidency, we are now completing a full cycle. So we think there should be a review of what has been happening before we will obviously hand over to the United States to take over. South Africa will thus persist in promoting, and this is very important to us, persist in promoting the peaceful resolution of global conflicts. Our foreign policy is guided by the principles of solidarity, peace, equality, human rights, and sustainable development for the collective benefit. We will persist in fulfilling this commitment without undue pressure and in line with South Africa's national sovereign interests. We welcome Lebanon's ceasefire and hope for an end to the genocide in Gaza. We hope that the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah will help bring stability to the region and end the cycle of violence along that border. What we want to see now is the urgent need to improve humanitarian conditions. Let the guns be silenced in this continent, but also around the world, and let unity and peace reign. Ladies and gentlemen, amid all these challenges, there are many opportunities. We believe the Global South remains the ray of hope. It encapsulates regions where economic growth has remained steady, populations are receptive to new ideas and transformative policies, and the political will for change remains very strong. We can all agree that countries in the Global South have immense potential for growth and development, which exists in our communities. We can capitalize on these new opportunities, whether in business, education, or innovation, to uplift and empower one another. Africa has been gaining more attention from the international community because of its dynamic economic progress. But as developing countries, we should also leverage on the digital economy to transform traditional economic processes, as this is the direction the global world is headed towards. Therefore, we must ensure that entrepreneurs, innovators, and workers harness digital technologies to meet their needs. However, we remain cognizant that the Global South is also industrializing and digitizing simultaneously. It is important for us to maintain balance and be inclusive in our programs and policies so that we leave no one behind. We must capitalize on the opportunities presented by the African Continental Free Trade Area, which establishes a unified continental market for products and services in Africa. It seeks to expedite inter-Africa trade and has the potential to enhance our economies and improve the quality of life of the people throughout the continent. This will result in the diversification of exports, the acceleration of growth, and an increase in investment and employment possibilities for South Africans and other Africans, and of course the broader continent as a whole. For success, African countries must prioritize the development of infrastructure, particularly for rail and road transport, as it is the most favored mode of transporting products, services, and also passengers. We must also invest heavily as South Africa in our ports to ensure efficient freight logistics. And as we do so, we also work with others in the continent. Compatriots and fellow delegates, another obstacle to our success is the effect of climate change, which impact the environment and livelihoods and result in socio-economic distress. To prevent such occurrences, we must remain dedicated to fulfilling the obligations outlined in the nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. To effectively respond to these disasters, and many of you would probably have seen in our own country here in various provinces, we've had floods and fires, etc., in KZN and other parts of our country. We must adjust our macroeconomic policies and create policy flexibility to address these challenges that we face today, especially these frequent weather shocks. We must also enhance infrastructure to be able to enhance economic resilience. As we work hard towards net zero, wealthier countries must afford us time to adjust but also ensure financial support to countries in the global south, and also policy assistance where required. Fellow delegates, as I conclude, I want to say that as we part ways for our respective destinations, our focus should be on implementing what has been discussed in this conference during these conversations. Because in many occasions, people go to conferences or seminars, we have good discussions, we take good resolutions, and then we don't implement. So it's important that we have to ensure that there is implementation. And indeed, the best way to measure a conference's success, it is to implement the resolution, so that when we come back to the next conference, to the next conversation, we are able to weigh and see if indeed we have been successful, and also see where the challenges still remain. Our country's development lies on our shoulders and nobody else. We must agree to do all we can to ensure a better future for the next generations. As former President Nelson Mandela once said, it always seems impossible until it is done. Therefore, we must speed implementation, because the speed of execution is the one that is going to ensure that we succeed. The speed of execution must remain our mantra. I want to take these opportunities, compatriots and fellow delegates, to wish you well. I know that we will be departing to our various destinations, but I hope that we're not seeing one another for the last time. These conversations are very important, and I want to thank former President Thabo Mbeki for leading this charge. And President Mbeki, I am sure that we as South Africans have gained a lot of experience now that this is the second conversation. The next one, of course, we do want others to help us, but we, with yourself, will be at the forefront of it. We will invite you, but we are going to lead it. Yes. We have gained a lot of experience now, and I'll also make sure that my office make time that I participate throughout the day, because I want to, the engagements are very exciting, interesting. I want to be part of them. But thank you very much to afford me this opportunity as we come to the end of this important conference, these conversations. I'm looking forward to seeing you, most of you, again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy President Paul Marshall Tile. President Mbeki had given me a task at the beginning of the conference to create a summary of the issues we must take forward. Your speech covered it all. I was just sitting there and actually really reflecting on the speech that you delivered today. And literally across 40 different conversations, the various ideas that we produce collectively, you captured in your oration this evening. Thank you so much for speaking to us. We began with drum beats. Who all were here in this room that day when we began that evening? Who all have a blue hand? My hand hurts. We began with the rhythm of the drums. We nearly got it right. But we have got to do better when we have to reform the global governance architecture. There we need to be in sync, and that is the message that is coming out of this conversation, that we are different, we have different geographies, we have different histories, we have different economies, we have a common future. And therefore we must double down and work harder to connect the rhythms that in many ways shape each of our societies, cultures and communities. And that is, I think, the core message coming out of Cape Town this time around. So I first want all of us who are in Cape Town, who are visiting Cape Town, to stand up and deliver a rousing thank you to all our hosts for the wonderful hospitality, for the wonderful music, for the wonderful friendship, and for the wonderful 3 days that we've had. Please stand up and applaud President Mbeki, the hotel, and of course, all of you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. When we began 2 years ago, India was at that point the president of the G20 plurilateral group, and it was, I remember Max who said it, that it was Vasudeva Kutumbakam, the world is one village, the Indian ethic, to Ubuntu, that in all we see our humanity. It was these two ethics that created this partnership between Thabo Mbeki Foundation and the Observer Research Foundation. The world is one village, we are one community, and we walk together. It is also the two towering personalities that have defined modern South Africa and modern India, Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela, and their visions and their inspirations to all of us that have helped shape this program. And therefore, it is a natural fit, this partnership between India and South Africa to create this global conversation is a fitting tribute to those leaders who sought a fairer, more just and more equitable world. And this in some ways is a tribute to the aspirations of those leaders for the directions that the people must choose. Before I close, I must mention that through this day, and I can see a full room right now, but through this day there's only one person who's heard every word in this conference, and that is President Thabo Mbeki. He is the only one who has heard everyone, who has diligently given time to everyone who had something to share. And I think that is, for me, the core message out of Cape Town. It is not important to be here on the stage speaking, it is important to listen. President Mbeki listened to all of us. And I think that itself is something we should take back from us. Take back from this conference. We have to listen more and speak less. Thank you, President. I have promised President Mbeki and my dear friend Max, who will speak to us, that we together, the foundations, will produce a call for action that we will present to the Honorable Deputy President and the leadership in South Africa for their consideration based on the rich conversations we have had. Over the next week, we will finalize this and we will make it available to all of you as well. This is something that we must do to take forward the agenda of having these very rich deliberations. And we must individually go back to our countries and impress on our political leadership, business leadership, and community leadership to take heed of the opportunity we have in these dark times to actually bring transformation that is desperately needed. So I hope you take back the Cape Town message with you, and we work in our own individual spaces to build a better world so that when we come back next year, we have something to cheer about. So thank you for being with us this time around, and namaste, thank you, and see you next year.
My brother Samir there is from Delhi, but he spends in a year, I suspect, 2 weeks in Delhi. He travels throughout the country, and my team thought I'm the most energetic person they know until we met Samir. Thanks a lot, Samir. But Mr. President, Deputy President Mashatile, Excellencies, friends and colleagues, we have come to a pause in an otherwise exciting 3 days of another successful annual Cape Town Conversations. I'm just here to thank each and every one of you for taking time to be with us in these 3 days, sharing your thoughts, your insights, experiences and hopes of moving the global south from the periphery to the center of the global agenda. I need to thank once again Samir for providing the leadership to all our teams, providing guidance and direction until this moment. I also want to thank our panelists and moderators for keeping this event as informative and insightful as it was. I want to return to our guest speakers and say to Deputy President Mashatile, we are your partners as South Africa is taking its rightful place as the chair of the G20. You can count on us, sir. I thank the Speaker of Parliament, Ms. Togo Didiza, who opened this meeting for us, and our other speakers, Sanjay Joshi, Nelson Murphy, Park Stau, Minister Nchaveni, Prime Minister Tony Abbott, Prime Minister Musa Mara, for all of the presentations and insightful experiences that you have shared with us. I also want to thank the editors and the contributors to the Cape Town Chronicle, because that's the idea of immortalizing the discussions that are taking place. That's a precursor to set out the thinking for this meeting. And as Samir is saying, we will then work out the action plans and other suggestions that we want to share with the G20 leadership. But I must do this, Samir, and repeat what you are saying, and really thank President Mbeki for his generosity of spirit and time, and for the time and guidance that he has provided us, and the questions that he keeps on asking so that we remain on track. I'm glad then, Samir, that we are about to finish the call to action that President has asked of us. But one of the defining features of this year's Cape Town Conversation has been the youth representation. I'm glad that I'm sitting in a room where almost more than 60% of those that are present are the one whose future we are discussing, because I suspect some of us, our future has already been destroyed. We were also quite excited about some of the inputs, Samir, that some colleagues have sent to us in terms of how we can do this thing better next time. It's a demonstration of how many people have actually taken over all of these conversations as theirs. And I'm glad that they feel that sense of ownership. But to all of the delegates that stood up and clapped hands, our Speaker of Parliament, Togo Didiza, has already invited all of you to explore the scenic landscape of the Ferris Cape, to visit its oceans, and maybe to hop onto a boat to Robben Island to rekindle the idea of the importance of the triumph over adversity, or continue in this wine route and not overindulge, but understand that despite the difficulties we've been discussing in this room, there's a beautiful world out there to enjoy. So as we're about to disperse and close this gathering that has been sitting in Cape Town for the past 3 days, let us imagine that the masses of the global South are waiting on us as principled and committed agents to live up to the promise of turning decades of hope, deferred dreams, into a practical program that will help turn these aspirations into realities of building a caring and a humane global order. Those that will be traveling back home, we wish you a safe journey. Thank you very much to each and every one of you. Namaste, asanteni sana. The meeting is adjourned until we meet again on the 24th of December 2025, but let the conversations continue. Thank you very much.